Keep bolstering that collection. You'll get to where I'm at someday. Hey, this reminds me of the old quote. Some people are born on third and think they hit a triple. I'm going to be rubbing it in on Frank all the time. How my collection's so much better than his.
He literally had sent me a text and an email in the last week apologizing for being such an asshole.
Apologize for rubbing it in, but look at this shit.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God here.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie,
Ian, you son of a bitch!
We're opening baseball cards. Frankie! Oh, we are having so for all of our listeners, you need to get over to YouTube to see this because this is a reveal episode. Frankie and I are getting heavy into our childhood hobby of baseball card collecting, but we are doing it with an eye towards making some cash. So Frank went out and bought himself a bunch of wax packs. We're going to look at them.
So let's have a quick moment here, right? Ian and I went away for a couple of weeks. We had some things change in our lives. We will leave it at that. Ian has his hands on a baseball card collection that is, how many cards do you think that total collection is? It 2 million? I've been telling people it's 2 million cards.
So we could talk about it. So my father passed away in August. So he died on August 25th, which sucks for sure. He was 78 years old. But one of the coolest gifts that he left me, my dad was a steelworker. He never really had a lot of money. My mom was a teacher. They, grew up in Michigan. We weren't poor, but we were pretty damn blue collar. But he collected baseball cards since I can remember. So, he, for 50 some years of his life, he was a collector. And my friends loved coming over because his office, which Frank has now seen, it's tremendous. I mean, it's like a sports collector's dream to go in there and look. He's got thousands and thousands and thousands of cards.
Let me tell people what it's like being the first time in there, right? Like I went in there, sadly, after he passed away, but I went in the basement and the smile on Ian's face to show me the pride on Ian's face to show me his dad's collection was incredible, first of all. Second of all, you walk down there and it's a fucking den of collector items. Like there's helmets from the USFL in the 80s. Like he's got all this cool shit. And then as you look around, he's got pictures of Babe Ruth. And he's got, like all this stuff is on the wall, framed, signed. The coolest thing, I was like, who's that? And he goes, that's me, baby. And then underneath Ian, between Ian and Nomar Garcia-Pera was Ian's son. So like the cool thing about this is the man was passionate about it. He was really good at collecting things. It's a lot of fun to see. It's kind of like going to Disney World of card collecting. And for my, one of my absolute best friends in the world, going in the basement and seeing that, like, it was just like I've heard stories, but it did this. It got us excited about something. I was a baseball card collector until I basically discovered girls in like 1991. About like 85, 86, when I was 10 to about 16 is when I was into it. And I used to look at like the rankings and like back then it was all through magazines, but it was so
Beckett pricing guide.
That's right. We would have a Beckett pricing guide at the house. We'd buy one every year at the 7-Eleven. But what's happened is this. About 5-6 years ago, I went out and bought a Dan Marino rookie card. And the reason I bought it is because, and it was signed. I had one when I was a kid. And I sold it. And I sold it because I wanted to buy the 1988 Topps Olympic baseball team set. Because in 88, there was a guy named Mike Fiore. And I was pretty positive Mike Fiore was going to become Mark McGwire, who was on the 84 team and who would become incredible. But I got my ass fleeced. And my dad was always mad that I got taken advantage of. So like 5-6 years ago, cards started coming back into the vernacular. I went out and spent $300 on a Marino rookie, $300 or $400. It's worth like $5,000 now. Because it's a gem mint 10, it's the tightest quality, and it's signed, and there's not a lot of them in existence. So what Ian and I have started to get into is we're starting to just chat and text, like we're like going on the internet and getting super excited about stuff. And as per the usual, when we get into something, Ian has an enormous head start over me. He's got this incredible collection. I've got a Troy Aikman 1998 card.
I'm definitely
he's got all this shit from the 30s or the 1800s that was in like a wiener package.
Frank's starting with a Dan Marino and a Billy Bean era card where the bat says "fuckface" on the knob, so he's pretty excited.
Not Billy Bean, Billy Ripken.
Whatever, Billy Ripken. That's right.
So we're gonna do this.
So it's so the cool thing about this. So I've for 2 months, Frank every day gets 3 or 4 text messages from me of like, look at this card. So I'm trying to help you understand the magnitude of what I'm trying to go through. So I went home. I flew home for 3 days to just start going through. So I'm hanging out in my dad's office. He's got a big ass desk, hundreds of binders, hundreds of drawers with cards. They're organized in different ways. He has.
Now it's important to say something real quick. All this stuff was in his dad's house, but Ian's moved it. It's all in a safe now somewhere else because for safety, like it's no longer in his house. It's gone. We've moved it to a different and more secure location.
That was one of my big things. So I'm glad Frank brought it. One of the big things is he just had this huge collection in my mom's house. So, for me, it was, I had to get it out of there. So it's gone. But it's, now I've got it in safety deposit boxes, a lot of it, and I've got a lot of it coming and back from, my office to my house. And, the really expensive stuff my dad still has in his own safety deposit box, which is now he didn't have that in my mom's name. It was in his name. He thought that it would be accessible because they're both at the same bank, but whatever, we're going through probate, but that's the really exciting stuff. That's all kind of stuck in there. He's got the 1952 Mickey Mantle Topps, which is the most iconic baseball card in collecting. He has all of the Babe Ruth Gowdy cards, which are on anyone's top 10 list of cards you try to acquire. He's got all of those really crazy old Ty Cobb cards, pretty much any card from 1950 to 2010. He owns it. But he has it organized in lots of different ways. He has them in binders. He has them in stacks. So Frankie, I'm going through the B's and you're like flipping through and it's like, in the B's could be everything. You're going through and it's like, oh, here's some Bob Boones, some Bill Buckners, all of them worth nothing, right? And then you're like, oh, here's 60 Yogi Berra cards, of which 40 are worth over $1,000. Like really old, and they're just in this section, right? That you're kind of flipping through, and then it's, you flip through some more, and you're like, oh, here's George Brett's. Most of these aren't worth anything, but there's 2 of his rookie. Oh, that's worth a lot of money. So I'm having to flip through. And I'm building a spreadsheet, putting it into my own kind of organization. Because what I want to do is help my mom know how to appraise it. You can hire services, Frankie, that'll come in and they'll kind of give you a ballpark and they'll try to do a big auction off. But you absolutely don't maximize value by doing that. Whoever's going to bid on it is trying to bid it so they can flip it. The way I'm kind of doing it, and let's be honest, I'm not going to sell much of it because it's my dad's collection and I love it. And my mom does too. So we're just trying to kind of get an appraised value on it. But to do that, there's a grading system. So Frank and I, we've invested in stocks, we've invested in real estate, residential, commercial. And before I'm going to go buy, let's say, a commercial real estate property, I'm going to look at comps.
Right. What's fascinating about this is we've gotten into it over the last couple of weeks. All the stuff that we know about from our disciplines of management, things we talk about here, buying right, selling right, all these different things, like a little bit of secrecy, a little bit of strategy, they all really come through in this. And the fun thing is it all applies, right? It all applies. And but it's around a really fun asset. I love the stuff I own from a house standpoint or a building standpoint. And it's super fun when you unpack something, you're like, holy, a Barry Bonds. It's very fun.
Yeah. So Frank and I have been talking a lot about it. So this episode, one thing we wanted to kind of talk about is maybe lessons that, my dad's nickname was the Beast. So I'll say holy Frankie, look at this. Look at what the Beast owned. Look at this card. And I'll send him a picture of it and he'll be like, what is that? And I'm like, this came out of a wiener pack. And he told me to be real careful with it because most of the cards were ruined because they actually shipped in the actual hot dog pack. So most of these cards have wiener juice on them, but he has one that doesn't have wiener juice on it. So it's really rare and it's expensive. So, when we look at this, let's get to the appraising piece of it. So Frank and I, if we buy a piece of real estate, we're going to look at comparables. And what we really care about is what's closed in the last 6 months, right? So Frank's going to look at, okay, is pricing going up in that area? What are the rent comparables? He's got certain metrics he's looking at, but you want to see what is a good price. And I think it's the same if you're just buying a house. You're going to go look at what's listed on the market, what the size is, dollars per square foot, same deal.
Let me tell you on a house how it's relevant, right? You do a couple of things. When we buy a house, we do address. So that would be Babe Ruth is your address, right?
Yeah.
You do square footage. So we do that. We look at the square foot, the beds, the baths, and then we look at the condition. And what we do is we say there's an as-is value, and then there's an after repair value. And where we make the majority of our money is in that difference between the as-is or purchase price. So if we can buy it for less than it's worth, as is, we can make money on it, which is what we try and do. And then what we do is we try and force value. Now, I'm really good at this, and our average is around $22,000 on the immediate flip. But this is really relevant to what we're talking about, Ian. I'm in the process of selling a portfolio of 51 houses, and I probably could have made $5,000 to $10,000 per house had I sold those when I acquired them. But I held them through the coronavirus, through 2 years of inflation. And now instead of making $5,000 to $10,000 a house, I'm making 60. So that's what happens when there's periods of inflation, and when you have a strong asset that's cash flowing or desirable, is they appreciate over time. What I've got is stuff that's a decade or two old. When there was euphoria around collecting, what his dad has is, because his dad was first to market. His dad was first to market, bought stuff that was really, really, really old. And he bought things before there was tons of people who were printing them, number one, and collecting them, number two. So he's early. But what he did is he bought his properties or his baseball cards in the path of progress. He's got some of the best players that have ever played. He bought them when they were not Hall of Famers. He bought it when they were in their 8th season. And he just thought. His dad also went to a bunch of AA baseball games, which was really cool because he would see young kids and he knew. I know his dad knew Miguel Cabrera was going to be incredible because he could hear how he hit the ball. And he knew that 22 years ago. And he started loading up on stuff with Miguel Cabrera before anyone had heard of it, because he was kind of scouting, which is really fascinating.
Great story on this. So my dad comes home from a Toledo Mud Hens game, AAA game, and with a bat, and it's a signed bat. And I look at it and I'm like, who's Jim Thome? And he goes, son, I've been watching baseball a long time, and I've never heard a noise like the noise that comes off this kid's bat. He said, I had to buy a bat, and I went and asked him if he would sign it. Hold that bat. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. Jim Thome, who became one of the greatest home run hitters of all time. So to Frank's point, my dad had season tickets to a minor league team in Toledo, which is 40 minutes from our house. And he went there for decades, and he would go watch all these kids as they were coming up. And he would always say, like, keep an eye on that one. He's going to be ridiculous. But he would go load up on their rookie cards if he saw that they were incredible. So he has batches of rookies of really good players throughout here. But let me get back to the appraisal piece. So Frank talked about how you do it in real estate. In the trading card game, in the 80s, 90s, cards started to get graded. So there wasn't real consistent. Back then, it was kind of a honor. You would say, hey, my card's mint. But what did that really mean? All card collectors always look at the corners. Are the corners nice and square? You also don't want the picture to be offset. You want to see an equal amount of white at the top border, bottom border, left and right. The back needs to be good. It can't have writing on it, scuffs. Lots of the old cards had printing issues, so they would be offset, tilted off to the side because they were hand cut, someone taking a press and literally pressing it down. And so if they did it off edge, or there could be blotches of ink, these weren't the greatest machines. So in the 80s, 90s, groups started coming along that would grade your cards, and PSA is the biggest. Another group is Beckett. And so what they do is you send it to them, and they have an independent appraiser look at the card. They get a magnifying glass out. They wear white gloves when they look at it. They look at the corners. They compare it to other things. They will tell you if it's authentic or if it's a counterfeit. You can also have these appraisers say whether an autograph is real or if it was counterfeited. And so you send them to these groups, and then they send it back to you in a plastic sealed case that can't be opened because to open it, you have to break it. And inside of it is your preserved card with a score 1 through 10. And, when I tell people, my dad has the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card, people say, oh my God, that card sold for $12 million. And I said, well, he doesn't have that Mickey Mantle card. And what I mean by that is there are only so many Mickey Mantle 1952 Topps that graded at 9 or 10. I think the 10s, there's only 3 that have ever graded at what's called a gem mint 10. That's a perfect score, and it's really hard to get. You have to have everything perfect. So Frank just bought a Troy Aikman. He didn't even get a gem mint and that's a brand new card. So that's what he just showed the screen. So, my old man's Mickey Mantle, he thinks it's like a 6, which probably means it's a 4 or 5, which is fine, but it's still a very expensive card, but he never got them graded. And he didn't because he started the collection so long, he thought it was a racket. He didn't trust the people he was sending the card to. He didn't trust whether he'd get it back, or if he did get it back, what kind of grade would they put on it? He was just old school. They kind of traded back then by looking at, he would be the appraiser. He would stare at it for 10 minutes at a card convention. So what I'm having to go do is any card that's worth over $100. And trust me, there are thousands of cards he has that aren't worth a penny. That's how it is, right? They're just overproduced, crappy names. No one wants it.
Like this Greg Harris, 1991 Donruss, garbage.
Absolute garbage. You might as well throw it in the garbage. No one will pay you a penny for that. It's not worth the shipping to even give it away, right? So use that as kindling for a nice holiday fire. But the ones that are over $100, I'm kind of starting with, okay, I have to start getting these graded. But this is Scott Buckhead, also worthless, but incredible stash. Scott Bankhead, yeah. So I have to go get these things appraised. So I have to send them to a rating agency. And that, depending on the value, there's a racket in that too. It's like $22 for a more common card. But if you have an expensive card, they could charge you up to $2,000-$3,000 to appraise it. And they just do that because they know they can. Because if I had a $300,000 Mickey Mantle card in my hand that could grade high, they're like, who else are you going to take this to? It's got to be serious. So they could charge you $3,000 for that, a percent, which is almost like a loan officer keeping an origination on your loan amount. So I'm in the process of having to go get all of these appraised so that, when I look at a card, there's some of my cards. I'll take an example. Let's take this, Frankie. I have one sitting here on my desk.
All right, everybody. Ian's about to flex. I've got my card from 1991.
No, this isn't too crazy. So this is if you can see it, this is a Willie Mays.
Not too crazy. It's a fucking Willie Mays.
This is a 1959 Bazooka hand cut giant card. So it's hand cut, meaning this probably came on the back of a Bazooka gum box, Frankie, and you had to cut it out. So you can see even the edges. It's kind of authentic. Someone cut this off of a Bazooka box. And so this card, even if it got graded a 3, is a $1,200 card. Anything higher than that, and it starts to get significantly more expensive. But, if you kind of look at that card, I don't know what this thing would grade at. It doesn't have any blemishes on it. The edges are rough because it was hand cut by someone. If you can see that the corners look fine, but it's not going to get an 8 or a 9 because it's hand cut, period. So for me, the difference in value of this card.
Stop there for 1 second. It's not going to get an 8 or a 9 because it's hand cut. But that means you have to look at each asset individually, just like you do with real estate or stocks or other things, and look at the comparatives, right? There is no comparative 10 because it was hand cut. They don't exist.
There is no 10. There's no 10 in the population.
That's right. So if you have a 5 or a 6 and the score only goes up to a 7, you have 90% of max value in that piece of. So what you've got to be very careful with in any asset is you've got to know what the floor is and what the ceiling is. And what Ian's got here, he's got a high ceiling card because there is no tens.
I think that's really important to say here. So this is something I've been talking to Frank about as I'm getting into it, and he's starting to kind of understand my thinking. So for the record, just so everyone can hear this, I inherit this really cool group of cards, and I'm working on this for my mom, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's really neat. You got this asset." So far, all I've done is buy $20,000 worth of cards. I'm not selling anything, and I probably won't. My dad never sold anything. So my son will probably inherit this, and my sister will get some of it. But I'm buying more than anything. But just to give you an example on this, Frank, I'm glad you brought up how many of these there are. There are 0 10s that have ever been graded a 10 of this card, and it's because it's a hand-cut card. There are also 0 9s ever that have been graded on this. There is only 1 8 that has ever been graded and only 1 7. And in fact, there are only 53 that have ever been graded in the population of this card, period. So this is an incredibly rare card because there weren't many of these bazooka boxes. Most people threw the bazooka box away, or if they cut it out, it's also awkward because it's big. It didn't fit in your card box or in your rubber band box. So not everyone would keep it. So this is one good example. If this thing was all beat up and written on and it wasn't good, this card might be worth $800. But if it got a decently high grade, it could be worth 10 grand. So part of what I have to go do, it's what Frank said is absolutely right. I have to go through each asset, see what the ceiling is, what the floor is, and then get it appraised. Until this is appraised, I have no idea what it is worth. It is literally, it could be $800. It could be $8,000. I don't know. It could be that big of a drop from grade to grade, Frankie.
There is a third option. You can do nothing. And that's the fun thing about owning things and not needing to do anything with them. Most people own things that they must do stuff with, so you feel pressure. Like when Ian first got into these cards, he felt pressure to move them or sell them, but there's no debt on them. There's all it is right now is just memories associated with it. And every day I get a couple of texts from Ian where he's just super excited about what he's uncovered from his old man. Like, holy shit, the old man was on to something. Like, it's really like there's almost like a closeness, right? But there's no pressure to it. And that's the difference between acquiring to flip and being a buy and hold investor. Warren Buffett doesn't feel any pressure to sell. Warren Buffett feels the opposite of pressure to sell. He feels pressure to buy because he's sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars with inflation. He's got to buy. Where this is the cool thing about like kind of graduating. Like this has been a really interesting microcosm about like business and friendship and like relationships with your dad. But like what you take from this is like in the beginning, you do things because you feel like you must or have to. But you eventually get to a place of discretion where you don't must or have to, you get to. And what Ian does every day when he flips these cards, he gets to look up. He feels it's really, 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 really fun. Something else I haven't told you yet, Ian, that I'll tell you here because I think it'll be fun. I told a bunch of people what you're doing, like what's going on, how you're doing it. And all of them have said to me, like people who know you, Ian is such a good writer. I wish he wrote a book about what it's been like going through these cards, some fun things he's done. Even if he does it in a blog and he turns into a book later or turns into something, they're like, I would read that. I'm really interested. Ian's a compelling writer, and it'd be really interesting to see what Ian's learning about his dad and kind of what he's going through as he's doing it. And like, so I've told you that kind of offline, but I thought it would be worthwhile to say here, like many people have said that to me.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. So I think, Frankie, I'll just stay on this a little bit longer. So like when you think about lessons in investing, I was telling Frank this the other day, my dad is the farthest thing from Warren Buffett in a lot of ways. Warren Buffett's a big time business tycoon. My dad was a low key, hardworking steelworker. But when it came to collecting, there's a lot of the same things in there. So Warren Buffett is a buy and hold guy. He buys stuff when it's cheap, and he holds it for 50 years and he never sells it, and it grows explosively in value. So this is a really good example where I don't know if my dad cut this out himself or if he bought it at a card show for $20. Probably the latter on this one because it's Willie Mays. but I'm willing to bet he bought it for a deal. He knew all kinds of different dealers, so he had a big network. Rich is, let's compare that to Frank. Frank's got a lot of realtors he knows. He gets leads from lots of unconventional sources. Frank's has a profitable business because he buys right. He buys smart, and he buys stuff that he can hold if he can't. He knows that I'm going to buy stuff that if I can't flip it, screw it, I'll hold it, and I'll hold it for a long time. And if I wait long enough, it'll be worth some money. And there's the same principle. So you take this, maybe he bought this sometime in the 60s or 70s, Frankie, and he probably bought it for 20 or 30 bucks. And today it could be worth $7,000 or $8,000. He bought it smart. Now, could my dad today just go buy this card? No chance. No chance. If this were rated high, my dad could go drop $8,000. I mean, he probably in his best year of his life, he made $60,000 at the steel mill. He was spending maybe $100 he would budget every couple of weeks, for his hobby. That was what he did, and he spent time on it. So I think the first thing I've kind of just been really impressed with in going through this is how patient you have to be to collect a collection like this and hold forever. I mean, it's awesome that he did it and how valuable it is. It's his things he bought these cards for have done so much better than the stock market over the last 40 years. And he couldn't go spend $20 on a stock. He could go spend 20 and buy a bunch of cards, put them away, keep it organized. And he just built that asset over time by just compounding results, right? Just let Charlie Munger talks about it all the time, is just let your gains rip, let your profits compound. And, for me, I now see what he left to my mom and me and my sister. And in organizing it, it's just awesome because I'm looking at things and I'm like, God, I wonder how low of a price he paid for this thing that has exploded in value. So I just paid $5,000 for a John Elway Gem Mint 10 rookie card. And that's a 1982 Topps card. My dad wasn't 84. So my dad wasn't big into football card set collecting back then, but he would go buy the guys that were pretty good, but he wasn't buying sets back then. But if there's any card that was made from 52 to 92, he has it somewhere in baseball. He just doesn't have the football, but it's expensive for me to go get Elway today, whereas in my dad, he bought a set back then for $30 and Elway might be in it. And if it grades at a 10, that's pretty explosive. So it's just fascinating to see how he was able to pick all of this stuff up on the cheap, but that takes patience. That takes knowing who to buy from, who to trust. He had a strong network and a network of people that trusted him and that he trusted and he traded with, almost always buying. My dad never went to conventions and sold. He always would go and nibble away and buy and just kind of add to his collection. But it's, to me, Frankie, we're trying to get in this now, but you and I are cheating. You and I we have a bankroll to go in and start building something. I don't think you and I have the patience to go start buying 2022 Topps Chrome sets and holding them for 50 years. We're kind of going in and playing and picking away at some of our favorite players right now. To go do this right, it would take an insane amount of patience if you had no capital to start.
For sure. And I don't think this needs to be a terribly long episode. And I think what we could do is we could do something fun where I pull a pack and you just reach your hand into your bag. If you have your bag with you, we each pull one out, tell a fun story and call it a day for this. But the point is this, I was kind of stale a few weeks ago and I wasn't in a bad mood, but I was a little stale. And I'm looking at things like the Dan Marino card I referenced earlier. I bought it for $400, which wasn't cheap. And it's worth $5,000 now because there's been a huge, Ian just bought basically the equivalent of that card in John Elway today, and he paid market for it. Now, am I going to retire on $4,000? No. But is it fun to know that I did that? Yeah. Did I buy a second card that's absolutely worthless and I probably lost $30 on it? Yes. But so there's some fun things in this for us. It's also fun sometimes to just do things that bring a smile to your face, that it kind of get your brain stimulated. This kind of reminds me in a way of dusting off an old classic, going back and reading a Steinbeck or reading something from Faulkner. Like there's beauty in it, and there's something fun, and there's nostalgia, but there's brilliance too. And that's what this is. Ian's seeing more of it because his dad on a very limited budget, like, just made smart moves over time. And Ian didn't say this. His dad did leave some notes about how much he spent for certain things. He's like, 1969, $48. And in 1969, $48 was like several hundred or $1,000.
It's a big deal to him. It's a big deal to us. Yeah.
But in relative terms, that money left in a checking account would be worth $100 today. And now it's worth tens of thousands of dollars in these cards. So it's just a lot of fun. And it's nostalgic, but it's also, it smacks at, I think there's a broader lesson in the scene, and you said it your way, I'll say it my way. You build skills and you don't know where the skills are going to be needed or used, but you have the skills, right? Like, I'm teaching both of my kids how to swim, and they're 3 and 1. Like, right now, I'm basically teaching them how not to drown. Someday they'll be able to enjoy swimming, but if they know how not to drown, they can get out of a tub. They fall in the pool, they can get out. Ian and I have learned how to assess things: talent in business, employees, staff members, who gets promoted, who doesn't get promoted, assets through stock acquisitions or real estate acquisitions. And all of those skills are transferable here. But we never thought Beast was teaching us lessons about acquiring, but he was. And he did it his way. So like, there's so many unbelievable lessons in this. Like, sometimes you just shut up and listen to people. It's like, wow, that person's got really interesting things to say. And they came about it in a very different, they landed at the same place I would have, but they came about it in a very different way.
Yeah.
It really opens your mind.
I think there's also, Frank, there's so many cool things out of it. There's the 10,000 hour rule that we've talked about in here, right? The Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah.
That has got way more than 10,000 hours into this, but he could spot a deal. He could say that's a good price at that card. I'm going to buy it. If I hold it, it's going to be worth a lot. You know, the things that I've been able to kind of see, and you're so right, in investing in general, the same principles apply. So I talked about Warren Buffett saying, hold forever, buy at a good price, don't get in and out of things too much, buy high quality assets. So he has a huge collection. He has some stuff that turned out to be worth nothing. And one fun thing that I've just done is,
you can't get everything right.
I've gone through his first 1,000 cards, and some of them I get excited about, and they're not worth a lot when I go look at auction prices. And some are worth way more than I would think, that I've passed through a few times when I looked at it. So by going in and looking at it, a number of things kind of stand out. So for me with collecting, go with the high quality as much as you can, right? So this is, Frank and I in a recent episode just talked about how, as he's looking at real estate with the recession looming, he's going to tighten up his zip codes. He's going to tighten up the radius that he's going to look at. He's not going to get too far out of the path of progress. He's not going to go on the edges of a zip code. Whereas in a hot market, you might stretch yourself a little. You know, so when I look at it, it's still the Mickey Mantles. It's still the Willie Mays. It's still Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb. It's names that everyone wants. So it's big names, big properties. So Hall of Famers. All of them are worth a lot more money than the non-Hall of Famers, obviously. It's quality. So when I say I'm getting these graded, a 10 will sell for 5x a 6 or a 7. It could be 20x. And then the other thing I would say that is just undefeated is supply and demand. There is a ton of demand for vintage Mickey Mantle cards. Mickey Mantle is the guy. It's like the Picasso of art. You know, it is. He's the icon of the sport. And I think that will stay that way. Even I never saw Mickey Mantle play, and I want Mickey Mantle. He's just cool. Babe Ruth is cool. But about those cards that makes them expensive, there weren't a lot made, and there certainly aren't a lot left that are in good condition. So if you have one in good condition, supply and demand is on your side. And I think one thing that the way Frank and I are looking at this, I just went and bought 5 cards in an auction, and I was going back and forth with Frank for 2 weeks about it. And I bought guys that I love. I love Lawrence Taylor, one of my favorite players of all time. Well, the thing that's unique about Lawrence Taylor is it doesn't matter what team you rooted for. You could be an Eagles or a Redskins or a Cowboys fan. You're like, yeah, he was the best defensive player I ever saw in my life. So there's only 200 of his rookie card in a gem mint. out there. And I don't know who owns them, but there's only 200. And one of them is now the property of Ian Mathews. And I bid on that thing, and I was willing to probably overbid if I needed, but I'm going to hold it forever because there's not a lot of them. So there's scarcity. In 1982, when Lawrence Taylor was a rookie, there was only Topps making rookie cards for him. So there's only one of them, and there's only 200 in great condition. I'm going to hold that thing because when people my age get into their 60s and 70s and they're insanely rich and don't know what to do with their money, they're going to buy the guys they know that they grew up watching. And I did the same with Elway. I did the same with the Cal Ripken Jr. I did the same with Ronnie Lott. I'm looking for cards that are rated a 10, high quality cards, Hall of Fame, elite people that there's a lot of demand for their rookie. I know there will be demand for the names that I just gave you. I'm sure of it, but the supply will be low. So when people start getting more and more money and get more into football, they're going to find that there's not a lot of Lawrence Taylors. There's not a lot of Ronnie Lotts. There's not a lot of Barry Sanders, Dan Marino's, John Elway's, like Frank bought. And as they get more and more discretionary income and they're willing to put 5, 10, 15, 20,000 into a rookie, they're going to find that you can't just go online and buy it like you could buy a stock at Scottrade. You have to go to auctions, like the places Frank's going to find. He's in a murky underworld of eBay trying to find some of these and get them graded. So, from an investing principles,
but there's but quickly,
yeah,
it's fun for me. I don't have a duffel bag full of shit someone gave me, so I want to feel the treasure hunt, and I might find nothing. But I also might find Daryl Boston, who's
that's huge. That's huge.
I got a Donruss of
Diamond Kings. Right.
Yeah, look at it is.
Here we go. We go.
And now I've already showed you my George Brett. I'm excited about my George Brett.
Hey, George Brett, I'd get excited about that.
$15.
That's a good card.
That's a good $11 on all this.
But Frankie, the way you and I are looking at it now, investing different than Beast did, because we have other investments and we're applying the same thing. Low supply, high demand, just like real estate. You want zip codes that are in high demand, where if you buy a house in the best zip code, your value will hold up in a recession more than if you're in the outskirts. You just talked the other day about, farther out from the city, gas prices go up, those prices drop on real estate. It's the same thing with collecting baseball cards.
For sure. So the other piece of it is this is speculative. Like Ian and I are not playing with tons and tons and tons of money. We're doing it with money that we can afford to have some fun or have a hobby with. And we might be wrong. Lawrence Taylor, may become the next OJ Simpson. And we don't ultimately, he's not as valuable, right? But I did buy an OJ 1970 gem in 10 FYI. But the point of the matter is, the fun part about this is there is a hobby to it, but we're using the same fundamentals. And we could be wrong, but my guess is we're going to be more right than wrong because we're using fundamentals that are tried and true in a multitude of different businesses and industries. And we're flying to quality. We're buying the best things and people who change the game or the best type of assets, and we're holding them. So with that type of a strategy, it might lose, but there's two things. It probably won't, and we're going to have a hell of a lot of fun doing it.
But I think, Frank, something you said is important. We're not 23 years old and trying to turn this into a career. No. I'm buying stuff that I'm going to hold for 20 years, and it's fun, and it's going to appreciate in value. It's not a waste. It's not a money that is a waste. I'll give another example. My dad sold one card in the late 80s, and we put a pool in our backyard. We were like the only house in Trenton around us that had an in-ground pool. I had friends over all the time. My dad still would lament about, I shouldn't have sold that card. Do you know what it would be worth today? And I'm always say, Dad, it was a piece of cardboard for like 10 years of amazing summer memories. Like that trade I'd take it all day. Who cares about that piece of cardboard? So he did sell a couple to make our lives better. And maybe one day I sell some of it, but I'm not doing this looking to flip. Just like in real estate, people that get into it to try to make a quick buck, a quick investment. If you get into real estate, get in it thinking I might have to own this thing for 10, 15, 20 years and do it for cash flow. It's the same thing with this hobby. I'm not buying anything that I wouldn't want to own in 20 years. I'm not buying anything speculating that in 6 months it'll be worth more money. I don't need this income. I'm only investing stuff that's thinking about it like a retirement, like a mutual fund that I get to. And in fact, pretty funny. I was talking my stock advisor is also a good friend. And I told him my plan and how much money I was planning to go put into, and he's freaking out. He's like, what, baseball cards? You're going to go? And I'm like, yeah, tell me how that's a worse idea than stocks, which is your line of work. Like, how great's that been going the last 4 years? So, for me, this is not a way to make quick money, but I'm pretty sure that if I do this smart, I could get a 5-10x on it over 20 years. I'm looking to trade some of my dad's lower quality stuff for higher quality 8, 9, and 10 graded stuff with only Hall of Fame baseball players in low supply cards. That's what I'm looking to trade. So maybe not have tens of thousands of cards, have a lot less cards, but higher quality. That's what I'm looking to do with this I'll call it a portfolio over the next 10 years. And it's going to be fun. And I think one last thing, Frankie, I'm just going to say that reminds me a little bit of what you do in your business that my dad did, is on the autograph side. So my dad, has one of the greatest autograph collections in the country. He has, if you played baseball from like 1955 to 2015, he has your autograph. When I say play baseball, I mean one at bat or one inning pitched. He has those people's autograph too. And he put that together, a lot of it just with hard work. Just roll your sleeves up, take a box of 400 cards to a Marriott because the Yankees are in town playing the Tigers, and wait at the hotel until they're going to the stadium, and bring your son and be like, that's Don Baylor, and give me 10 cards and I got to run over and get an autograph. And there's Don Mattingly. And there's, I remember going through all of that. But he would take assets, cheap assets, cards, and by getting an autograph, he added value. And now they're worth significantly more. So a lot of the cards you're pulling, they're worth nothing, sure. But that Ryan Sandberg, if it was autographed, be worth 50, 60 bucks, maybe 100 to somebody. As it is right now in your hand, it's worthless. It's not worth anything. So the way Frank goes and he buys an asset at a low price, but he's got the infrastructure and the know-how to go upgrade right, put the right money in the right areas, and then he can flip it for more money. You got to have the ability to add value. The way my dad added value to cards is he got them autographed. And so now he has thousands and thousands of autographs, which made a bunch of otherwise worthless cardboard into assets.
There was a thing your dad did incredibly well that we've talked about a little bit here. Like prior to getting on and doing this, and it was about being a completionist. And what his dad did is this was his dad's passion. I'm guessing at some point, Ian's mom and his dad had fought over baseball cards, like his obsession with baseball cards and collecting and knowing things and getting signatures. Like, you don't become great at something without obsessing over it. He obsessed over it. But what's left is a really cool set of stories and a really cool kind of history and legacy, right? And it's really neat, but he put in hours and hours and weeks and months and years, and it turned out to be decades. He did this for almost 6 decades. Like, he was doing this. He was at it a very long time, and he just wanted to acquire things because it brought him joy. And one of the big regrets in my life is I never actually met Ian's dad. Sadly, it just didn't happen. But what I always knew of him is he was a guy that he was a happy guy. He was a very happy guy. He used some incredible disciplines, but he found something that brought him incredible joy. I almost got held back in 2nd grade. I'm not that smart. I had to beg to get into the University of Florida. Like, literally, we didn't do anything illegal, but my guidance counselor could call and say, this is a good student. Would you think of maybe taking his deferral, making him a Gator? And I got in. All right. And I was on thin ice. I barely got in. But the point is, like, people look at me now and say I'm so smart. I'm so smart because I found something I love, and all I do is do it. I don't have a lot of hobbies. Now I have about 300 baseball cards. But besides that, like, that's it. I'm a dad, I'm a father, and I'm a real estate guy in Richmond, Virginia. I know who I am, and I've just poured everything I can into it. And that's what Ian did with this, or Ian's dad did with this. And it's so fun to kind of be, it's tangible and fun. Had he done this with something that we didn't understand, we couldn't be having this episode. But it's baseball cards and football cards, it's people who we love, and it's things that we rooted for. These are men in the arena when we were children. These were the titans of our youth, and we got to root for them. And now it's fun to have the relics.
Yeah, I'll close up here in that it's a hell of an inheritance for me because it's been a really hard 2 months. My dad was my best friend. And it's one of the greatest gifts he could give me is this collection to play with. I tell my mom every day that I feel close to dad today. I pulled a card that I remembered going and getting an autograph with him. So many of these cards are my childhood with him. And I got away from the collection for a long time, raising kids, trying to make money in a job, doing all that. But it's been so fun for me to just get back into the hobby, to have his collection to kind of play with and go through. It's keeping me really close to him. And what's fun, Frankie, is I'm coming home with, 50 cards in my hand, and IJ wants to see him. My son wants to see him. He's a big baseball player, and he's getting into baseball cards a little more. I just bought him a couple of wax sets, and it's something for us to kind of talk to. So when I look at, if I could go take, $200,000-$300,000, out of some 401k that's in a bunch of mutual funds that I don't know anything of, and go put it into something like this and say, I'm going to hold this for 20, 30 years as well. This is a hell of a lot more fun. And it'll keep me close with my son. Now, Frank and I are talking about all the time. I'm here to tell everyone Frank will have $300,000 in baseball cards within 12 months. He's wired the same way I am. And we're going to be trading back and forth and going to conventions. Like this is just
follow Lawrence Taylor while we've been doing this.
Everything I talk about, Frank ends up investing with. He gets excited about my tech startup. I get excited about his real estate. It's kind of what we do. And this is going to end up being the exact same, but it's fun. Like if you're going to invest in things, Frank is so right. I am running, like I'm taking IJ to football, bringing him back, having dinner with my family. 9:00, I'm coming to my office until midnight, sitting here going through cards, putting them into spreadsheets, looking up auction prices, trying to appraise it, looking how I can upgrade it. What can I get this 6 and a 9 and upgrade it and make it even better? So I'm passionate about it. So I'm studying it. I'm paying attention. And we've often said you can't always chase passion. But when it comes to investing, I do believe you should invest in things that you're passionate about. Invest in stocks, companies that that you're passionate about, that you want to own. Invest in real estate that the territories, the areas, or certain types of assets that you really are excited about. And I think it's the same thing with this. This is a different realm of world, so it's fun for us to talk about. But all the lessons of stocks, investing in companies, whether it's startups or stocks, real estate, they all apply to this, and it's been an absolute blast. And I'm just getting started. I'm scared of just how much this thing might take off, because I got a lot of my dad's passion in me when it comes to this hobby, and it's something I'm kind of looking forward to, expanding on.
All right, should we end with this, Ian? I'm going to give you one of 3 packs. We'll open it and see if there's anything worth the shit.
Let's do it.
Pick one.
Let's do it. Let's do the 1990 Fleer.
This one?
No, the Dunruss. What year's the Dunruss?
The Dunruss, they don't tell you what fucking year.
All right, let's open it. It's even better. All right, we'll do the red or the orange. Red or let's
orange.
see if I can tell you what year by looking at it. Let's go with the red.
All right, red. All right, so here we go. Here's the pack. Donruss, I don't know. It doesn't, well, it's after 1988 because there's something on the back about a statistic from 1988. So it might be 1989. Okay. So who was a rookie in 1989?
A lot of good ones around then. That's Ken Griffey's year.
This is the 88 set, Ian. And you can tell the set.
I think Gary Sheffield. If you pull a Gary Sheffield, that's a money card. Here, let me see. What's the last year?
90. This is 80. This is the 88 set.
Okay. 88?
Yep. Donruss 88.
I think Barry Bonds was 87.
He was 87. Dave Dravecky, worthless. Ooh. Rick Sutcliffe.
Okay.
Throw him in the pile of shit to look at. Ken Okerfell. Nickel not only knows this guy, he knows the length of his mustache and who his mom and dad are and where he went to middle school.
Fantastic.
Ooh, this is a good one.
All right, Mitch. Okay.
Kevin Mitchell.
Okay. What is that? I don't think that's a rookie. That might be close though. He was a rookie.
That's his third year.
Third year. Okay.
That's before he had all the home runs.
You need a rookie for anything to be worth any money in that pack. Just
yeah, for sure.
What's is that worthless?
Who knows? Tom Browning, never heard of him. Mark Davis, Giants. Steve Bedrosian.
Okay, pitcher.
I feel like he was somebody that
relief pitcher.
Ooh, yeah. This is a fun one. Not a rookie by any stretch.
Ooh, Nolan Ryan. There we go. Yeah. It's like his 20th year in the league.
All these are in real good shape. All right, this guy I've never heard of. Danny Cox.
Okay.
Yeah, say the name because people can't.
Jose De Leon.
Yep. Ooh, I don't know him. Manny Hernandez. I do like his first name.
Worthless, good mustache.
Exactly. Tim Belcher, rookie. Did he do anything?
Belcher was okay.
All right, we'll toss him into the let's look it up stack. Bill Gullickson.
Okay.
And then Jeff Sellers.
Okay. So, fun opening that up. He didn't spend a lot of money. We were hoping for a rookie. We didn't get one. The wax pack kind of situation is always a good time. So I'm going to finish since you said we were going to do it this way. So Frankie, I am going to put a card up there and you are just going to try to guess the year.
Pull it closer. I can't see it. All right. So for those of you listening, this thing it's got a green bottom, a yellow top. It looks insanely old. It looks hand cut. The corners are they're not 90-degree angles. They're like almost 45-degree angles. The guy's got socks up to his past his calves.
And it's a mini card. And it's a mini card about half the size of a typical card today.
Okay. Soft cap in his baseball swing. Red sleeves. I'm gonna guess that is from 1910.
Ooh, you came really close. This is a 1911 D304 General Baking Company. So this card came in a loaf of bread.
It looks like it
as it came in. The guy's name is Charles Herzog. Clearly not anyone's ever heard of. But even in just an authentic of this, it's probably a $200 to $300 card, but 110-year-old card. So for me, when I look at something like this, probably one I would never think of getting rid of because it's probably a fun story of how my old man would have come across something this old in the first place, usually from another old guy that was getting ready to die and didn't want his collection to go to some young jerk and wanted someone older to have it. So that's how a lot of that happened. But we have fun with this. I know this is a little different than our typical episodes, but I also think Frank and I don't have an actual typical episode anyway. So had a little fun talking about hobbies.
Hey, 1990. So not 111 years old, but I'll show you the highlights of this pack.
Only pull out someone if they're a Hall of Famer, because the rest are brutal to look at.
Jose Rijo, not a Hall of Famer.
Stop. He's got to be great to show it.
Julio Franco.
Okay, good player, borderline Hall of Famer.
And bought Nickel's sister boobs. True story.
Oh, Griffey Diamond King. That's a nice card. I'd put that aside.
Correct.
Okay. Did pretty good, Frankie. Hey, Frankie. Great episode, dude. Keep bolstering that collection. You'll get to where I'm at someday. Hey, this reminds me of the old quote. Some people are born on third and think they hit a triple. I'm going to be rubbing it in on Frank all the time. How my collection's so much better than his.
He literally had sent me a text and an email in the last week apologizing for being such an asshole.
Apologize for rubbing it in, but look at this.
See ya.
Hey, if you're new to the show, hit subscribe. And if you're a longtime listener and you liked us talking about baseball cards, give us a 5-star review on Apple. Peace.